Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
Welcome to the Love Haze podcast, where we believe that healing and wholeness are not just destinations.
That's right. We believe they're a journey. And here on the Love Haze, we talk about how to navigate through that thing, y'all.
That's right. And today, we're going to talk about the stories that we tell ourselves. We're going to take a look at how our perceptions can take us well off our own path and talk about how it ultimately impacts the relationships that we have with our people.
That part.
We're going to take some time, dissect that thing today, and just get to it. Welcome back to our Black Love journey. Let's get right into it.
Let's go.
So, tell me about where this idea came from for this particular episode. What has you thinking about the stories that we tell ourselves?
It comes up often in our conversations. Like if you listen to some of the topics, we'll be like, we need to talk about the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And so we finally just going to sit down and unpack the stories that we tell ourselves. And so not only does it come up often, it's like such a through line in our interactions with people, right? So you know how people say there's your side, their side, and then there's the truth.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with perceptions. There's another saying that's going around these days, like, well, that's her reality. That's her truth. That's their truth, right?
Yeah.
I think there's some validity to that. And there is some of it that is just a perception that is not really founded on like facts, like what actually is taking place. Some of that is actually like fake news, right? I think about when my team at work, right? So especially I've had a lot of experience with teams integrating. And when you are just getting to know people, there's a period where you have to like build trust. Trust is built. And especially in a remote environment where you can't you're not face to face to really get a sense of someone's tone and their how they really are and what they're really going through and what they really mean. So when you come into like virtual settings, I'll use as an example. And let's say your camera's always off, maybe because you either have babies in the background or you're always having to take kids to work, or maybe if it's for a religious reason.
Right.
But me being a new person, I don't really know that. And so I could be telling myself, this person doesn't like to meet with me. This person is not engaged, or this person. So I'm telling myself all of these stories that for some reason tend to be negative. When really it has nothing to do with me or any of that. And so I coach my team through when we're integrating, especially I'm like early on, connect the dots for people. You can't make meetings. Don't just decline it. Put a little note like I have a meeting conflict, or I have an appointment, or connect the dots for people. I'm going off camera so I can eat lunch. I'm going off camera so I can have breakfast. I'm like, make it plain so that no one has the time or the instinct to tell a story that's actually not true. And then it severs the relationship for no reason. And so I'd love for us to just unpack that. Like, I know it's come up in our relationship. When our first date, as a matter of fact, you were telling yourself a story about what was actually going on versus like what was really going on. And I just thought it warrants its own conversation because it really does show up in all of our relationships, every part of our life. And it'd be just, I think, interesting to talk about it.
Real stuff. I was thinking about what you were just saying about like connecting the dots for people. And as much as I believe in that, I also feel like there's a portion of the responsibility that we have for ourselves about the stories that we tell ourselves. And I can't think of any situations where there is not a story that I'm telling myself about what is going on with a particular interaction. And I think to your point, especially having so much remote work now, having so much, so many of even me being back at work and participating on teams. One of the things that we tell our veterans, and they tell all staff, like, have your camera on, all those things. And there are still people who just will not turn their cameras on for anything. And I'm always telling myself, like, especially when my boss is on the meetings, like, why don't you make this person turn their camera on, or why don't you do anything about that? And what I found a lot of times is that I still find myself making it about me, right? And why not this person? And not caring really about what this other person may have going on, and just wondering why they won't just fall in line, why they won't just comply, why they won't just, do this thing. Why is it that I always have to be the one that's doing the right thing?
Yeah, that's real. And not only do we make it about ourselves, I know this has come up often a couple times in our conversations about the 4 agreements and how like one of the agreements really
Hmm.
is like it's not about you. But it's not only do we make it about ourselves, we then, for lack of a better word, almost villainize. That feels really strong, but we make it personal about the other
Hmm.
person instead of about the circumstance. So to
Hmm.
your point, we had a recent conversation about extending grace to people and wanting grace for ourselves. When it's about us, it could like we have the tendency to be like, oh, I'm just having a rough day, or I got this circumstance going on that is impacting
Hmm.
how I'm showing up. When it comes to somebody else, we automatically go to it's because this is how that person is,
Hmm.
not necessarily thinking about the circumstance that they have going on. And so it really does behoove us, like in interactions, like I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves in terms of how to navigate through it,
Hmm.
but like to just stop and like assume good intent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before you start telling yourself this story. So let's back up a little bit and make it plain for the people. And let's start with us. How has this shown up in your life, Scott Hayes? Please tell the
Just
people.
shows up in my life every day.
Uh-huh.
So I see you keep want to go back to our first date.
Well, tell them. Tell
Uh,
them what happened.
so Shatay and I agreed to meet
On Valentine's Day.
on Valentine's Day for it was supposed to be just a meetup. It wasn't really supposed to be a date. Neither one of us were really feeling Valentine's Day, didn't believe in the hype of it, whatever. We're gonna meet at this Mexican restaurant. And, we'll have some drinks, have something to eat. In my mind, we were. And just kick it. So we get there, we get the little free chips or whatever. We both order a drink. And so I was like, okay. She she looked like her picture. All good.
We
So
met
I'm thinking,
online.
right.
FYI.
And I'm ready to kick it a little bit more. I'm like, oh, this is good conversation. She cute. Let's kick it a little bit more. I say, hey, we've had our drinks. Do you want to order some food? And this lady's like, nah, I think I'm good.
That's not how it happened, but go ahead. Go ahead.
And so I'm like, okay, I don't want no drinks with you either then. So I proceed to get the check and we leave each other. I'm gonna walk her to her car. Whole time in my mind, I'm like, dang, she must not think I'm cute. I know I'm handsome. So I ain't even worried about it. Matter of fact, I ought to just stay in here and catch me somebody up in here. But I'm gonna be a
Wow.
gentleman. Walk her to her car. This is the story that I'm telling myself.
Mm.
Get to her car, and this lady got like a 1990
It's not.
something.
It is certainly not that. It's a 2006 Toyota Solara. I love that car. It did me so good. I
I think it's like a
love that car. It
1999
is an
Toyota
'06.
Solara.
It's a 2006.
It's this long
Oh
beige
my
car,
gosh, get on
and
my
it's
nerves with
dirty.
that. It's not dirty. Okay, so now he's just going all the way left, right? Do
So
you see
anyway,
the
but
point?
no, what I'm saying is these were the things that I was telling my mind. Like, how dare she reject me
Mm-hmm.
in this moment? And you got the nerve to be driving this old Solara when you
Oh,
can
it's
get
a
with
gorgeous
this.
car. I love that car.
But anyway, I was telling myself all the bad things about her because she cut our date short. And
Shout out to Solaris. Can I just say actually what really happened?
yeah, absolutely.
So I had recently moved back to Atlanta, and at this point I had been here about 6 months, transitioning into a new line of work, and so I was being super frugal. I've had experiences in the past where just be honest, I didn't know if the dude could afford the date and maybe I had to pick it up or whatever. And so I was being super frugal. I had already been like maxing out cards in terms of my transition and trying to like just be mindful of my spending. And so I did not want to assume that if we were to rack up this huge bill, that this man was going to be like, he was going to take care of it. I was like, I need to be prepared if something goes left that I can afford whatever, or I want to pay for whatever I have consumed. So we have drinks, we have
Free
chips and
tortilla chip.
salsa, having really good conversation. And in my mind, I was like, okay, like how much longer can I linger with this conversation without ordering food, without it being awkward? Because I just was like, I'm just not gonna do meal. I'm comfortable with drinks if I had to pay. And so after a while, like we had drinks and had been talking for a little while, and like it had been some time. Like we finished drinks and like we're still talking. And so then I was like, oh, he ready to go? Like It was just kind of that. He didn't even ask you want to eat. I was just like, this has been cool. Are you ready? Kind of like basically we're wrapping this up. And he actually took care of the bill. And
I didn't ask if you wanted to eat.
I don't remember that part. I just remember being like,
y'all
are you ready to go?
But
the point is he told himself a story about being rejected when really it was about me governing myself, right? And my own finances and making sure that, I could handle it should things go left. Cause that ladies back me up, that stuff can happen. Like for real.
She never been with a baller. That's what it is.
Baller. So yeah, and yet here we are. He talked all the noise, made it about me rejecting him, and really it had nothing to do with him at all, actually.
And thinking about the impact that could have had, there was a portion of that time where I was like, she getting in the car, I ain't never calling her again. Because how dare she not stay and have dinner with me?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the story I was telling myself about my own esteem, my own worth. And that's what happens. Like people have their own situations in their own lives and their own stuff that they're navigating through. Yep. And it doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
They've, tried to carve out some space to include you in that moment or be in the space that they're in. And I think that's why it's so important to learn those lessons about like having grace for other people and saving space for folk. Because, by the time you get finished telling yourself a story, you somewhere all the way left and way off the mark with what it is that is the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Like it happens all the time. Like that's how it's shown up in our specific relationship. But I don't know, I watch TV and I'm trying to think of a specific movie or a show or something. Okay, here we go. Here's a good example. Brown Sugar. So shout out to all my 2000s Black love movies. I love them all. They're like my favorite movies. So Love Jones, even though I know that was the 90s. Love Jones, Love and Basketball, Brown Sugar, The Wood, all of those early 2000 movies. I'm just like, yes, I can watch them over and over.
And you do.
And I do. Brown Sugar, right? So Taye Diggs and Nicole Ari Parker have their like breakup conversation at the pool hall or at the place. They have drinks. Sanaa Lathan broke up with Boris Kodjoe. She's on her way back from her breakup conversation. She walks down the street. She sees Taye Diggs give Nicole Ari Parker a kiss on the cheek. She's in tears and she turns around and runs away, not knowing that was like the end of a relationship. And then she just like leaves. So what would have happened if Taye Diggs had not come back around to be like, I'm in love with you, and, like storm the radio station? Like a lot of those things happen, especially in TV where like you see one thing, not really knowing the truth of it, you react as a result. And then what happens to the relationship? And of course, because it's TV, it always comes back around to a resolution. But I often think like, but does that actually happen in real life? Do people come back around and actually have the resolve? Or how often do we have folks like seeing a situation without stopping to ask more questions, without stopping to have a conversation? And what does it do to their relationships?
I was saying, yeah, in the midst of you talking, but you were actually asking, does it come back around? For a lot of people, it doesn't, because we tell ourselves a story and it becomes our truth, right? And sometimes we can make our truth the truth and operate from that place. And we never go back and have the conversation. I think at the heart of all of it is like, are we willing to have the difficult conversation? Am I willing to just ask the question and maybe get an answer that I don't want and just say, hey, this happened. I felt this thing.
What I thought was this.
What I saw or what I heard or what I felt in this moment was this thing, and run the risk of being wrong or run the risk of it being absolutely right.
Yeah.
And sometimes our fear of rejection and fear of not being accepted will allow us to just run with that narrative and miss out on some really great friendships, relationships, or opportunities to even support people because we have the narrative that we've given ourselves, and that becomes the truth. rather than just having difficult conversations.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they have to be difficult. Like I know some situations they can be, but I don't know if they have to be. And what happens is like we're just out here running on assumptions. Like
Hmm.
you're assuming you took one reference point and then have told yourself built an entire story around one point
Hmm.
of data or one point of feedback versus like stopping to say, okay, like, well, what are the other parts of the story
Hmm.
that will give this more context or give it more color? And so it's really unfortunate that that happens, and I guess it's unfortunate in my opinion because it doesn't have to if we
Hmm.
just.
And I guess that makes me take a pause and think about the terminology I use when I say difficult. It's not that we're having difficult conversations. I think that sometimes it's just easy to run with our own
Mhm.
narrative rather than to use our words.
Use your freaking words, grown people. Just use them.
But it's difficult for me at times. It's easier for me to not and just say that I'm okay and say that uh, I understand. It's all good. And really, what I'm understanding is the story that I've told myself. Um, and it leads me to just easily say, this is what it is for me. And I think I've talked about this before. When we were small and we used to play fight and that kind of stuff. When you play fighting with a cousin or play fighting with your brother or whatever, y'all passing lists back and forth. Um, it's easy to do that because I can brace for the blow,
Mhm.
right? If you mess around and catch me off guard and I don't brace for it, then I absorb the full weight of that blow, and I haven't had a chance to brace for it. I think the story that I tell myself sometimes is me bracing for bad news.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, the work that I've had to do, the internal work that I've had to do, is learning to not always be thinking that it's going to be bad or something negative, right? And sometimes it can definitely be positive stuff, but I'm just so used to like having to prepare for bad news for some reason.
Yeah.
But those are my own stuck points, my own traumas that I have to deal with. And if I just prepare for it to be bad, then if something good happens, then that's great. But at least I prepared,
Mhm.
And we had this conversation in my man cave group the other day about um, the way, especially men, are socialized. Even from the times we're in like Boy Scouts, one of the mottos is a good Boy Scout is always prepared,
Mhm.
right? You're always prepared for something bad to happen.
Mhm.
As a man, you're supposed to always be prepared in case something bad happens. I always keep this amount of money on me in case something goes wrong. I
Mhm.
always do this. I know how to do this in case, just in case, just in case. And it's never really in case something good happens,
Yeah.
right? So if we're always prepared for something bad, then we have the story that we tell ourselves that is probably negative.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to be prepared for whatever that blow is, or not even give the person the opportunity to disappoint me.
Mhm. I can see that. But is that the case for everybody? Like,
No,
why is it that most folks will automatically jump to the negative? Like, do you know what I mean? Instead of the positive. And I don't know that there's an answer to that because I don't think that situation is just specific to you. I think most folks would be like, oh, I guess, yeah, I would have thought the same thing. Like, oh, you want to have dinner? Actually, I don't know if I would have thought that you weren't interested. I would have thought probably like, I
you
wonder.
ain't got no money.
Yeah. You just not been able to afford it or something, like, well, why? I wonder why we don't automatically think like, oh, I wonder, I hope his family's okay. Or I hope, you know what I mean? I
Mm.
hope, like, what if they had to run back to work? He must have had, we don't ever jump to those types of things.
You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of our friend Lola Choi from
Mm,
Heal Black Joy,
mm-hmm,
and the conversations that we had with her and that she has on an ongoing basis about the relationship that we have with joy,
mm,
and
mm-hmm,
how
mm-hmm,
even being a Black person in America, like the idea of having joy and
mm-hmm,
having it uninterrupted
mm-hmm.
sometimes can be foreign for us. Like,
Yeah,
what's the next thing I got to struggle through?
yeah.
Is there this place in my life where I can just truly experience joy? And if I do experience joy, when is the other shoe gonna drop? You
Yeah.
know,
Shout out to Lola Troy and Heal Black Joy, all the work she's doing.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned foreboding joy, which is Auntie Brene. Like shout out to Brene Brown and the work she's doing around shame and that. Yeah, I like we always say, it always comes back to our own wholeness and healing
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So then, what's the haze of this? The stories. It could be either the haze of the stories that we tell ourselves, which I think we've already touched on a little bit, or like the haze of breaking that habit.
Um, for me, it is making a different habit. Um, starting
That's
to
the
deal with
haze.
starting to deal with what I know my automatic thoughts are. And
Mhm,
we've talked about automatic thoughts here before. Those are the first things that come up for us when we are in the midst of an experience,
mhm,
and actively having to change what those automatic thoughts look like,
mhm.
or my response to those automatic thoughts.
Yeah,
When I experience something and I want to make it a bad thing, or I want to even make it about me, and it's somebody else involved, trying to pull myself out of that thing and understand that this person got their own set of issues that they're dealing with that don't have anything to do with me. And the last thing that they need from me is my judgment about what
mhm,
is going on in their life.
mhm.
And is there a space for me to find something positive, to bring out for them, or a way to support them in whatever it is that they may be going through? Because it definitely impacts the relationships that we have with people, about whether or not we approach situations from a standpoint of how can I support, or is there anything that you need, and pulling myself out of the situation, and finding a way to not make it about me,
Yeah,
changing my response to those automatic thoughts. That's the always going to be the haze for me, because I always put myself in stuff, and a lot of times I don't have no business there. It ain't about me.
yeah. I agree with that, breaking those automatic thoughts. And I would even go further and say breaking the automatic patterns, like the
Hmm.
automatic behavior that comes after it. So for me, that would be shut down, or most times I'm moving really quickly. And so because I'm moving so fast, there's a lot of room for error when you move that quickly.
Hmm.
So the haze for me, I don't know if it's so much as a haze or it's like an intentional practice that like just requires literally energy to do it, effort to do it, is to slow down. Like, okay, maybe I'm moving too fast, especially when you're exchanging things through like chat or email. And now I'm talking back to work, and something I could like read something the wrong way and be like,
Hmm.
what, immediately want to go into my angry Kermit,
Hmm.
when really I just need to like,
You and this angry Kermit.
I love that. It feels like my spirit meme. Um, just to like, okay, wait, actually, let me just pause.
Hmm.
Let me like take a second. Let me reread it, or let me reassess what I'm thinking. And if maybe I'm wrong, and if I'm not wrong, what do I want to do with that information? Or
Yeah.
either way, what I want to do with it. So the pause, like slowing down is a haze. I would say uh getting curious, not furious is a haze. So like being
Nice.
able to like, okay, let me not immediately get upset. Let me ask more questions. Like,
Hmm.
can you explain what you meant by this? Or like, what were you thinking when? Like, like, and finding the language to not be furious when
Right.
actually you might be feeling it. Like, basically taking steps to make sure that you're not fracturing the relationship is a haze, because your
Yeah.
immediate response will be to like just feel how you feel and then
Hmm.
act accordingly. For me, it's like a shutdown,
Hmm.
or like, you know, um, hot words,
Yeah.
and like just actually taking a step back so that you can protect the relationship is a haze.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think our inkling a lot of times is to, get furious and
Yeah.
not curious,
Hmm.
and it takes some investment in relationship to be curious, and setting the tone of like, at baseline, I know that this person means well. To believe that people are
Assuming good
coming from
intent is
a
a
right,
haze. Hmm.
assuming good intent, especially in the world that we live in currently.
Yeah.
We just are always on guard now.
Hmm.
And you look at the news, you will always be on
Yeah.
guard, and
There's a lot
always
going
ready
on.
to protect your home and yourself and all of those types of things. And it can, it can just end up being a really bad thing for us when we're always in protective stance or in protective
Hmm.
mode.
Hmm.
We don't give people a chance to just be who they are and assume good intent and move forward.
Yeah. That all of that is a haze. And I think even through some of this, we've talked about like how to navigate through it. But any additional thoughts there? We've mentioned already, like connecting the dots for other people so that they don't have an opportunity to tell the story to themselves. If we need more information to connect the dots for ourselves, stopping to ask those questions. Anything else? Slowing down honestly is a way to not navigate it, and it's also a haze. Like anything else that like really, I think at the end of the day, it's like, can the thinking or the question be like, what would it take for me to protect or honor this relationship above like being right? Right or relationship comes up often in our conversations. Like, is there a way? And I think our first thoughts aren't to protect the relationship. Our first thoughts are to protect ourselves. So,
and that's really it. Pulling me out of it. Because when you're in relationship, it doesn't have to be that I'm dying to what it is that I need. It is that I am seeking first to understand rather than to be understood, right? I want to try to understand what this other person is going through, and so that we can navigate the relationship together, right? Because at the end of the day, I want us to be in relationship. I want us to be able to figure it out, because there will be intersections of thought, of how my day is going, all of the different layers of things that add on to, what my particular system may be going through at that time. Is going to intersect with what you're going through and your whole person, and how your whole person is interacting with the world. And those intersections, and what I'm saying is, I choose you at the end of the day. And I want to make sure that I understand what you're going through, so we can try to navigate it together.
Yeah. And I also want to be clear that sometimes we might not should like protect the relationship. And I think that's a whole other conversation about how do you know when, you've done all that you can to protect the relationship and it's still like, and you need to let it go. So that's another part of it. But I think in terms of first response, right? How can we like slow down, chill out, not climb up? What does Brene Brown call it? I think it's like ladder of inference or ladder, something she says, when basically you have I saw this one kiss on the cheek, right? And I thought that the day was over. I thought they had, broken up. I saw this one kiss on the cheek and I immediately like, it's over with, my feelings are gone. I have no chance anymore. I'm just going to like ignore him and not talk anymore. Like, how do you get from seeing that one thing to like all these this entirely different story? Like how do we break that cycle, that pattern?
And we just have to be intentional about wanting more than the one data point to use your because you can't, even if you're playing a simple game of connect the dots, you need more than one dot, right, to make a connection. And so if I think about that in terms of human connection, I need more than one thing about you to make any type of connection, And so if we're going to do it in that way, then I need more than this point. I need to know this point, this point, this point, this point, in order to connect the dots for things to make sense.
For y'all.
I can't with you.
Connect four.
That's almost like you have loose associations. Almost about ready to diagnose you with schizophrenia.
Dang, I hate it so much.
Connect for you.
Rebuke that. That's what you just said. Connect this, that, and this, that, and this, that, and this, that. That's immediately what I was thinking. Connect four.
That's good. Man.
You might have to explain what loose associations are, though. Like, what does that mean?
When a person is talking about like one thing and you kind of loosely associate it with something else that's a little bit different.
But it's related. Is loose associations like a bad thing? Is it like a negative connotation?
A little bit.
Really?
But it's okay.
I know a lot of people. I don't want to say where. I know a lot of people who do that, actually. You'd be like, wait, how are we talking about this?
I'll work with you. I know some doctors. We can get you some medication.
I'm going somewhere.
But no, really, just being able to have more than one data point.
Yeah.
More than one point of reference when you're trying to connect, I think is, how we do it. Give ourselves the space and the time and the energy and the investment in the relationship to be able to connect.
Investment in the relationship is real. investment in the truth.
G.
Any lessons you've learned around this? Clearly, we together still, so hopefully you've learned something.
Ooh. Whoa. Whoa.
Not in that way. Do you see how you just took it one way?
The energy.
I'm saying, after you told yourself a story about our first date and it turned out to be absolutely not true, and now here we are on the other side of a marriage, right? 4 years together, 4+ years together, 2+ years married. Any other learnings around stories on your end?
That they will always be here, but that when you're in a relationship, you need to ask more questions. Like we have the right to get our questions answered. We need to seek clarity, and that will always help you navigate the space better.
Yeah.
Whether you know, to your point that, you know, you're not going to always be able to put a nice, pretty bow on things, but it still will help you navigate the space.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I tell my veterans is it definitely is not the blowing of the wind, it's the setting of the sail. Right. So the wind is going to do what the wind is going to do. I get to set my sail. And so I get to ask questions, get the truth, and then I know how to navigate. That's really what it's about, learning how to navigate, you know, life and love and relationship with folk that you care about. Just learn how to navigate it.
Get all the information first, y'all. Like, yeah, I like that, getting all the information and then navigating it from there. I was just about to think of, I had a thought about that. Crap, and it's going away. I was trying to think of some other situations in our specific lives or relationships where the stories come up. And the only thing, I lost the thought, but the thread that I was pulling on was, you know, sometimes we hear each other in conversations with family members or friends or whatever, and then we hear one part of a conversation and then be like, you know, kind of frown up at it.
Right.
Like when you get off the phone, I know for me, when I've heard it happen to, like, I've heard you say something, and I'll be like, you know, what is that? What does he mean? You know, I'd already like
made up your mind.
Made up my mind and like been hot almost for a second, and then finally ask a question. Like, let me ask him a question when he gets off the phone, and then I'm like, oh, okay, like that's what it was, right? So it still happens, I think, in little ways. But the point is, like, just ask a question.
Yeah.
Asking all them questions.
Yeah. So, what does this feel like? What is your music for the moment?
The song that came to mind for me, the vibe that came to mind for me, were the Temptations. Just My Imagination. Running Away. Right?
Right.
Shout out to the Temptations and that whole old school playlist we have on Spotify. But just feels like that. Like, you told the story, the song, I'm sure everybody knows it, but, you know, they in love and, you know, whole relationship. She don't even know that man. Just My Imagination. Once again, as my grandmother says. Running away with me. So that is basically the stories we tell ourselves. And this situation just happens to be a quite lovely story and fantasy. And actually that could be a visualization. Like, maybe that's something we could talk about, but trying to visualize his woman. But this, the point of it is, like, there's something going on in your mind that's actually not what really happened.
Right.
And so how do we invest more when it comes to relationships? How do we invest more energy, more effort, more time into, like, getting to the rooter to the tutor of the situation?
Yes, ma'am.
Without jumping off.
All right.
Any other thoughts to add here?
Just that it is important that we peel back the layers and have discussion and figure things out based on, like, facts and not our own human frailty. Those automatic thoughts that can just lead us down a dark road. It's important to have factual data and be able to navigate based on that.
Yep. Just say no to automatic thoughts, automatic behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Pause, ask more questions. Yeah, I love that. I'm glad we've unpacked this a little bit. So now anytime the stories we tell ourselves come up in our other conversations, we have a point of reference. We'll bring it back here where we've unpacked it. We appreciate y'all joining us. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe. If you are streaming from Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts, please, all of them, please like and leave us a review. Let us know how you feel about the conversations we have, and we greatly appreciate you. And with that, like we always say, life will always present us with a haze, but you, me, we, us, everybody, we have everything that we need within us to navigate through it.
That's right. And you're not alone. So join us next time and every time, and we're going to take the journey together. Let's do this thing, y'all. We appreciate y'all. Peace.
Peace.
Why'd you take so long to come to me? Oh, baby.